Welcome to The Straight Stitch, a podcast about sewing and other fiber arts. This is episode 85, and my name is Janet Szabo. I'll be your guide as we explore all things sewing. I am back from my sewing vacation. If you've been listening to the podcast for any length of time, you'll know that I teach at a local quilt store here in Kalispell, Montana. The store happens to be a Bernina dealer, and Bernina hosts an annual event every summer called Bernina University. And this year, it just happened to be in Salt Lake City, which isn't that far from us. So back in January, I asked the owner of the quilt store if I could tag along with the group that was going from her store. Now, obviously, this was on my dime because I'm not an employee of the store. When I teach, I work as an independent contractor, but I felt that it was worthwhile and would be an investment in my teaching skills to be able to spend 4 days taking classes. It's a win-win for everybody. So I tagged along with the group, and we left here, 6 of us, on Friday morning, June 27th. Our flight left Kalispell at 5:30 in the morning, and we were in Salt Lake City by 7. We got ourselves to the Hyatt Regency downtown, checked in, registered and got our goodie bags, and waited for the opening session to begin. I mentioned that all of us who were going to BU decided to wear quilted jackets, and you heard the saga of my quilted jacket a couple of episodes ago. One of the members of our group, a young woman named Sammy, made her jacket out of Tula Pink's new line of fabric called Full Moon Forest. And not only did she use the fabric, but she also did some very cool embroidery, and she added ribbon and a couple of other touches to the jacket, and she decided to enter it into the fashion show. The fashion show was supposed to be part of the opening session, so she left to go get ready for that, and the rest of us waited outside the ballroom. And while we were standing there waiting, I noticed that Meg Goodman was walking around interviewing people. Meg is the host of Bernina's podcast, which is called So and So. And Meg is one of my idols. I absolutely love her as a podcast host. And you may discover, if you listen for any length of time, that I've tried to model my style after her style. And I decided that it was my opportunity to go thank her for being an inspiration to me. So I went up and introduced myself, and we chatted for a few minutes. And she's lovely and gracious, and it was wonderful to meet another sewing podcast host. And in fact, she just emailed me today to let me know that the So-and-So episode about BU is going to be out at the end of July, I think on July 31st. So if you haven't listened to that podcast yet, I strongly urge you to go listen to it. And if you want to hear more about BU, you can listen to that episode that's coming out at the end of July. At 10 a.m., the opening session started. We were in the front row so that we had a great view of our friend. The program started out with Christy Burcham, who is one of the Bernina executives, and Nick Vareos, who you might know from Project Runway, hosting the fashion show, and we got to see lots of beautiful outfits, beautiful garments. Sammy came out in her quilted jacket to lots of oohs and ahs, and I really think that if there had been an audience choice award, she would have won it. So that was delightful. And for the rest of the weekend, everywhere we went as a group, if she was wearing the jacket, people came up to us to compliment her on it and ask her about it. So that was really wonderful too. The rest of the opening session was devoted to showcasing the new machine releases. So this year, there is a new Burnett combo machine, which is a combination serger and cover stitch machine. It's called the Maker's Edition, and I had a chance to sew on it. Julian Collins is Bernina's spokesperson for that machine, and he's a fantastic person, just also very gracious, very warm and welcoming. Bernina completely redid their 3 Series line. They have 2 new 3 Series machines. So if you are looking for a great second machine, maybe a travel machine, I'd suggest looking at that line. They have also expanded and upgraded their 700 series machines. And all of this information is on the Bernina website if you're interested. We broke for lunch, and my afternoon class, I had 2 of them. The first one was with Amanda Murphy, and it wasn't a hands-on class so much as it was an introduction to her new fabric line, which is called Moonlight Serenade, and it's absolutely gorgeous. It's a beautiful purple and white and silver combination of fabrics, and there is a panel for teaching long arm ruler quilting, and I think I may end up getting that panel, and I might do that as a class at the store. I have to talk to the owner about it, but it was very intriguing. After that class, I had a class with Mary Beck, who's a phenomenal teacher. I had 2 classes with her over the weekend, and I loved both of them. She did a session on Friday afternoon on new overlocker accessories. So this is where I got to play around with the new Maker's Edition Burnett combo machine. We were experimenting with the hemmer attachment and with the belt loop attachments. If you are in the market for a serger/cover stitch machine, I would definitely put that one on your list and go to a store and try it out. And again, I think those may end up being classes at our store this fall. Bernina hosted a welcome reception on Friday evening. I have to say, we were fed extremely well over the weekend. Every single day there was a snack at 10 a.m. and a snack at 3 p.m. And during the Friday reception, there were appetizers set out, and we didn't go out to dinner because we were full from the reception. During the reception, they also opened up the merchant market, which is not a vendor market per se because nothing in there is for sale on a retail basis, but stores can walk around and they can place wholesale orders with the suppliers. And I was delighted to see both Wonderfill threads there. And I also saw Chris Murphy from Simply Classic. And if you are a bag maker, you might remember my interview with Chris a few months ago. So it was great to see her at BU and catch up with her. Her booth was very busy, and I think she was happy about that. Saturday was my big class day. And I started in the morning with a class called Go for the Pro, where we were embroidering on the 700 and I think the 790 machines. Don't quote me on that. The 700 is a dedicated embroidery machine. It has no feed dogs, so all it does is embroidery. And that happened to be the machine that I was on. I know nothing about machine embroidery, so I made sure to choose classes that focused on machine embroidery. A lot of these classes are intended for dealers and store staff to take back and teach at their local stores, and this class was no exception. When it's taught in a store, it's typically a 3-hour class. Mary Beck condensed it down to an hour and a half, so we were not messing around. It went really quickly, but I happened to be sitting next to someone who was fairly knowledgeable about machine embroidery, and she helped me when I ran into a few snags, and we spent the morning making tea caddies, embroidered fabric tea caddies to carry around bags of tea. And one of the things that I love about Bernina is that not only do they have the project, but they have the supplies to fill the project too. So as we were leaving the classroom, we were instructed to pick up a couple of tea bags and a little packet of honey to go into our tea caddy. After that class and before lunch, I had a couple of short classes that were only half an hour each. One was a presentation by the owner of Wonderful Threads on their new line of stabilizers. And again, I know nothing about embroidery, so it was good to sit in on that class and learn about the new stabilizers that are available. After that, I attended a session presented by Superior Threads on their line of threads, which was also interesting. Even though I'm a Wonderful educator, I do try to keep up on what's going on in the world of thread. My afternoon class was a 3.5-hour class called Embroider on Everything. And one of the ballrooms was set up with about 40 or 50 Bernina 990 machines, which are the top of the line machines. And I have worked on the Bernina 990, not a lot, but enough that I'm not terrified of it. And in order to get a lot of students through this class, through each session, they had us double up. So each machine had 2 sewists sitting at it. And my partner was a staff member from a store in New York State. And the way they set the class up was each of us had to decide if we were going to be an elk or a bee. So I chose elk, and the elks were instructed to go to the back of the classroom to learn how to hoop a baseball cap. So in order to embroider on a machine, you normally have to put things in a hoop, and there was a special hoop insert for the baseball caps. So we went to the back of the room to learn how to do that. And while we were doing that, the bees were sitting at the machine and they were embroidering a tote bag. Now, each of us had received a kit that contained everything. So I had a kit that contained a tote bag, a hat, and a towel, and so did my partner. But in order to get us through the class, each of us was only doing one big item from the kit, and then each of us was able to do a towel. So my partner embroidered her tote bag, and then I put the hat on the machine, and I embroidered a little sewing machine on the front of my baseball cap. And I have to tell you, that is just magical when you've never done that before. And during the last hour of the class, each of us was able to do a little rally towel, a small towel. And we use the magnetic hoop for that, with a warning that magnetic hoops are not kind to fingers. I got my towel onto the machine, and it was getting close to the end of class time. And the teacher and the class aides were kind of hurrying people along because they wanted to get the classroom cleaned up and ready for the next session on Sunday. So I had just started embroidering the word Bernina on my towel when my partner, thinking that she was being helpful, reached up and said, "Oh, you need this spool of thread," and snipped the spool of thread to hand it to me. And it was right in the middle of the embroidery. Now, these are smart machines, and you can go back and tell the machine to start at a previous stitching line. So I think my partner felt bad about it. She rethreaded the machine for me and restarted it, but I don't think the machine was threaded properly, and the needle broke. So then we had to call over one of the class aides, and he got the machine very quickly and very deftly, got the machine up and running again. But I felt like saying it wasn't my fault. But these things happen. Sunday was a lighter day, and I'll tell you, I needed that after 2 very intense days of classes. Our Sunday morning class was a lot of fun. I was in there with Ashley, who is the daughter of the owner of our quilt store, and Ashley has been an absolute breath of fresh air. She started working at the store, I think, last fall, and her title is operations manager. She completely redid the website and the point of sale system. She's full of energy and full of enthusiasm, and is at that age. I think she's about the same age as my younger daughter, where she's got lots of great ideas. And we have been scheming about classes and how to get younger sewists into the store. So I am teaching a pillowcase class at the end of July. But Ashley said, you need to make the samples, the store samples, out of this really modern looking fabric. So I did that, and we have 8 people signed up. There are 10 spots, so we have room for 2 more, but I'm thrilled about that response and really looking forward to teaching that class. In our Sunday morning class, we were on the 790 machines using the Teflon foot because we were sewing vinyl. And we made a really cute little zipper pouch. And the zipper pouch is intended to be put into a binder. So at the end of the class, we had to make buttonholes. And I've made buttonholes before. They don't scare me, but I've never made buttonholes on a Bernina before. And oh my goodness, it was life-changing. So now I want to put buttonholes on everything. I had a break after lunch for a couple of hours, and then my late Sunday afternoon class was called Guiding the Garment Customer Journey. So one of the things that I've kind of been preaching about for the last several months is that quilt stores have a great opportunity to capture garment sewists now that Joann Fabrics has closed. And I was really gratified to see that there was an emphasis on exactly that at Bernina University. A lot of garment sewists don't think about quilt stores as a source for garment fabrics, but many quilt stores do carry fabrics just beyond plain old quilting cotton. And that's one of the things that I've really appreciated about our store here is that the owner is always more than willing to bring in garment fabrics for classes that I'm teaching or just in general. She's got a great line of rayon batiks. She has carried ponte knits, linens, and now I'm making some woven tops out of Cape Facet widebacks because that's a gorgeous cotton sateen. So I think I have enough Cape fabric for about half a dozen woven tops. And I should mention that while I was at Bernina University, I wore something that I made every single day. Whether that was tops or pants or my quilted jacket, I always had on something that came out of my sewing room. I thought it was a great class. The teacher was a woman named Maggie Smith, who owns a store called Pin Tuck and Pearl in New Hampshire. And she had lots of good ideas. There were lots of good ideas from people who were in the class. And I was happy to see that our store is a little bit ahead of the curve, but of course there are always other things that we could be doing. And in fact, this morning I stopped into the store and got about 3 or 4 different fabrics to make some store samples, because samples go a long way towards selling fabric and patterns. My Monday classes were all lectures. I didn't have any hands-on classes. We started off the morning with Gail Yellen. And again, I was so thrilled to be in this class. Gail is a phenomenal teacher. She has a YouTube channel. If you do any serging at all, absolutely check her out. And she did a kind of a live demo where she had a serger set up, and I'll tell you, the most interesting thing about that class was getting to see her video set up. And if I ever start doing videos on my YouTube channel, I'm going to model my setup after hers because hers is fabulous. My second morning class was an in-depth overview of the 700 series and the 300 series machines. And even though I'm not an employee of the store, and so I'm not technically selling machines, I do get questions in my classes, and so it's good for me to know what the different machine capabilities are, what the features are, so that if people ask me questions, I don't have to go find somebody to answer them. I can answer them myself. After lunch, Ashley and I were in another garment class, and this one was presented by Fabian Renteria, who is one of the Bernina educators. And he talked about places to source materials if you're a store and you want to start carrying garment fabrics and patterns. Where do you go to get those things? Again, it was a great class because people in the class also contributed their ideas and their sources. And then my last class of the day was called Embroidery Stabilizer Boot Camp, and it was presented by someone from OESD. If you do any machine embroidery, I'm sure you're familiar with OESD. This class went through the different kinds of embroidery stabilizers and when and where you might use them. I found it tremendously helpful and very interesting. Unfortunately, I had to leave about 30 minutes before the class was over because I was flying to Seattle and I needed to get to the airport. Attending Bernina University was only part one of my sewing vacation, and I needed to get to part two. So this requires a little bit of backstory and explanation. I have a very good friend that I have known for 45 years. He and I have known each other since I was 14 and he was 16 because we played trombone together in high school in the band. In addition to being the pianist at my church, I also have many years of experience playing the trombone. I played all the way through high school, all the way through college, and I played when my kids were in elementary school. And I don't play anymore, but my friend and I are still very good friends. His name is Robert, and his girlfriend's name is Deana, and Deana is a sewist. I interviewed her last year on the podcast. It was in September, I think, because she does a lot of production for farmers market, and in the past couple of months, she's also taken up custom embroidery. They came to visit last September, and they said that they wanted to come back for a couple of weeks again during the summer. And our rental house happens to be unoccupied at the moment, so we told them that they were welcome to come and stay for a few weeks. They flew into Spokane, Washington. They actually live in eastern Tennessee. My friend Robert works with drum corps around the country, and this year he's working with the Sacramento Mandarins. And he found out that the Mandarins were going to be at a show in Everett, Washington, just after he and Deana flew into Spokane. So they decided to fly into Spokane and drive to Seattle, and I decided that I was going to fly from Salt Lake City to Seattle, and we were going to meet there so that I could attend this drum corps show because I love music and I was in marching band and I just thought it would be a great time. So I flew from Salt Lake City to Seattle, got there Monday evening, rented a car, got a hotel room. Tuesday morning, I drove up to Everett, Washington and met them, and I whisked Deana away with me for a day of fabric shopping because Robert was going to go work with the drum corps. Deana and I got on the ferry in Edmonds, Washington. We went over to Kingston and then drove to Port Gamble, which is about 8 miles away. And Port Gamble is a lovely little historic town, and there is a store there called the Quilted Straight. And I had been to this store a couple years ago, but I haven't been recently because it seems like every time I'm driving through there, that route happens to be on the way to my daughter's in-laws' house. And as I'm driving to visit my daughter's in-laws, it's usually early in the morning or late in the evening and the store is closed. So it was wonderful to be able to go there with Deana. She was on a mission to find fabrics that she hasn't been able to find at home, and bought several 1-yard cuts of quilting cottons. And she also really likes fat quarters, so she got some of those. I got a fat quarter bundle of some sewing themed fabric that's going to be probably part of my gift bag for our Christmas gift exchange at our sewing group that meets on Thursday. I also got another 1-yard cut of Kaffe Fassett wide back to make a woven top. And I bought Amanda Murphy's new book on free motion quilting. That book is intended, I think, to be kind of a doodling book so that you get practice making different free motion quilting designs. But I've decided that I can probably photocopy each page and then quilt the page. I'm saying quilt in quotation marks. Quilt the page on my Q20 so that I can actually get the rhythm of the design kind of into my brain. After we left the Quilted Straight, we drove down to Bainbridge Island. I spend a lot of time in Seattle because my daughter lives there, and so I'm used to kind of running around to fabric stores by myself. So we went to Bainbridge Island to Esther's Fabrics, which is a cute little store in the quaint town of Bainbridge. And we had lunch first, and we had the most amazing turkey sandwiches. I think that was probably the best turkey sandwich I've ever eaten in my entire life. And with a full tummy, we headed over to do some shopping. I bought a little girl's dress pattern because, again, I'm looking for things that I can teach at the store. And Deana found a few more quilting cottons and a couple more fat quarters. We took the ferry from Bainbridge Island back over to downtown Seattle, got off the ferry, and drove down to my favorite fabric store in Seattle, which is Pacific Fabrics. You've heard me talk about Pacific Fabrics in the past. I love that store. It's in a kind of a weird location. It's in the SoDo area of Seattle, which stands for south of downtown, but that tends to be a rather industrial area. And indeed, Pacific Fabrics started out as part of a recycling company, an iron recycling and rag recycling company in the early 1900s. And they're still at that location. So we popped in there to see what kind of trouble we could get into. Deana found more quilting cotton and more fat quarters, and I came out with a beautiful piece of kind of a seafoam green lightweight linen because I will be teaching the Remy Raglan pattern from Sew House 7 at the store in a few months, and I'm going to use that for my version of it. After I get my muslin made, then I'll make a real version, and that's the fabric that I'm intending to use. We headed back to Everett, Washington, and had dinner with Robert, and then Wednesday morning, we were not to be outdone by our trip on Tuesday. On Wednesday morning, we headed north from Everett, and we went to Hobby Lobby and Michael's because we both wanted to see what Michael's was going to be carrying now that Joann Fabrics has closed. And I always like to see what different Hobby Lobby stores carry. The two stores happened to be nearby each other, so that was easy. We got to go to both of them. And after checking out both of those stores, and I have to say, Michael's has fabric. Michael's has some sewing supplies. Apparently, they're getting more sewing supplies. Again, I am not a snob. If you buy fabric at Michael's, I don't judge. You know, if we all just minded our own business, I think the world would be a better place. So if that's where you go to get your fabric, good for you. I'm just happy that you're sewing. After we left those two stores, we went to Mount Vernon, Washington, to a little store called the Calico Quilt Shop. And this was a darling store. It's not huge, but oh my goodness, they have fabric everywhere. I picked up a fat quarter bundle of Tim Holtz's blue fabric from his palette collection. He's releasing a different color every month. Last month, I think it was teal. This month, it's blue. I've been getting 2 fat quarters of each different color. They only had 1 fat quarter of the blue, but I thought I could probably find another fat quarter somewhere else. So I bought what they had. I also bought a chunk of Kaffe Fassett wide back in black and white. It's a very dramatic print. And I also got the last 1.5 yards that was on a bolt of Anna Maria Perry cotton lawn. You might recognize that name. Anna Maria Perry was formerly Anna Maria Horner, and she works with Free Spirit Fabrics. Her designs are very vibrant and colorful, and I was thrilled to find that 1.5 yards of cotton lawn. And I actually do have a summer top pattern that I can get out of 1 yard of fabric, so I think I'm going to make that using that fabric just so I can sew with the cotton lawn. It's so delicate and beautiful. Deana came out with more fabric from that store as well. We had a great time and enjoyed that store very much. After we left Mount Vernon, we headed back down toward Everett to a store called Quilting Mayhem in Snohomish. And I can't remember where I heard about Quilting Mayhem, but it's been on my radar for a while. I just haven't had an opportunity to go there. So we made a trip and it was well worth the effort. We did have to drive around the block about 3 or 4 times before we were able to snag a parking space in front of the store. Parking is definitely at a premium there, especially during the height of tourist season. But as I said, it was well worth the effort. Quilting Mayhem is in a huge building that takes up the entirety of one block. The front of the store spans one block, and the building has 2 floors. So on the bottom floor is a large classroom space and the retail space. And then upstairs are several long arm machines, as well as the garment fabric and all of the sewing machines and accessories. And I think there was also a classroom, smaller classroom or a meeting area up there as well. I was really trying not to overload myself. I had done quite a bit of fabric shopping already. So I bought 3 packs, the 2.5-inch mini charm packs of 3 different fabric lines from Ruby Star, because I like to use those to make little zipper pouches. And I also bought the Tim Holtz palette bag. It's just a shopping bag to hold all of my treasures that I had been buying on this trip. And I got another 1.5 yards of, I took what was left on the bolt, of one of the prints from the Tim Holtz palette, the blue palette. So I got one of the prints in that line. I really do love Tim Holtz, in case that was not obvious. On Wednesday night, Robert and Deana and I went to the drum corps show at Everett Memorial Stadium. It was wonderful. I really enjoyed it. It was great to see the groups perform. The weather was great, although it did get cooler in the evening, so I took my quilted jacket, which I think is going to get a lot of wear this year. We left Seattle bright and early Thursday morning to head back to Montana. By about mid-morning, we were in Spokane, so we stopped at the Quilting Bee, which is one of my favorite places to shop when I'm over in Spokane, which I am quite frequently on my way to Seattle. And I picked up a fat quarter bundle of the Tim Holtz Blue collection there because they also carry that line, and I was pretty sure I'd be able to find some there. That was our last quilt store stop on the way home. We got back to Montana and we're eating dinner about 6:30. Deana is over in the rental house for 2 weeks. I set her up with my old Janome 6600 sewing machine and a cutting table and an ironing board and an iron, and she is as happy as a clam to be over there sewing. Robert goes hiking every day, so it's great having them here. And Deana and I have plans to go to Missoula either this week or next to do some fabric shopping down there. So that's what I did on my summer sewing vacation. I'll tell you, May and June were just one thing after another, and I felt like I was on a hamster wheel. So when we got to Salt Lake City for Bernina University, I breathed a big sigh of relief because I knew that at least for the next week, I was going to be immersed in sewing in some way, shape, or form. And now that I'm home, I have the month of July before everything starts ripening in the garden and I need to do canning. But I've got most of the month of July to do nothing but sew, and that's what I plan to do. I will be back to my regular weekly schedule until I travel again, which will probably be in a couple of months. If you have feedback or suggestions for show topics or guests, by all means let me know. You can use the fan mail feature, and you'll see that at the beginning of your download. If you've downloaded from Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can leave a comment on the show notes page. The show website is at www.thestraightstitchpodcast.com. You can leave feedback on Apple Podcasts or Spotify. I love seeing all the reviews. I really appreciate the feedback that I've been getting there. You can email me at janet@janetzabo.com, and my website is at www.janetzabo.com, where you will find links to my Big Sky Knitting Designs website as well as to my blog. And my blog is the place where I usually post all of my makes and links to things, interesting sewing things that I found. So if you want to check that out, go to www.janetzabo.com. So I think I'm going to go up to my sewing room and work on a few projects. I hope that until our next episode, you have a great week and that you also get to go sew something.